Antes de mais, boa noite a todos. Obrigado por estarem presentes em mais esta iniciativa da APDC. Queria só dirigir-vos umas muito breves palavras. Eu acho que nenhum de nós hoje em dia tem ou terá muitas dúvidas que nós atravessamos tempos muito desafiantes, tempos muito complicados, tempos de grande transformação, tempos que são de angústia, que são muitas vezes de ansiedade, que são às vezes de desalento, mas que são tempos também que é quase um lugar comum dizê-lo, mas são tempos que também nos estimulam, são tempos que nos convocam, que pedem que demos o melhor de nós próprios como gestores, como líderes, mas talvez ainda, ou sobretudo, como cidadãos. Eu acho que nós todos temos a noção, hoje em dia, particularmente aguda, de que estamos a viver uma transformação na nossa sociedade, que é particularmente profunda e que estamos a ser convocados para participar na construção de um futuro que vai ser radicalmente diferente da sociedade que nós herdamos, da sociedade que herdamos dos nossos pais, e estamos a ser convocados para construir uma sociedade que é a sociedade onde vão viver e onde vão trabalhar os nossos filhos. E este é um desafio que, obviamente, e ao contrário do que nós às vezes paroquialmente gostamos de pensar, é um desafio que é fundamentalmente global, é um desafio que não é português, é um desafio que é europeu, é um desafio que é mundial. Aquilo que nós somos hoje é um legado de um projeto de paz e de um projeto de prosperidade que nos ultrapassa, e é obviamente nesse contexto que nós temos que procurar soluções e pistas para construir o nosso futuro. Por outro lado, nós também sabemos todos particularmente bem que o nosso setor, o setor das TIC, está particularmente convocado para participar na construção deste futuro próximo. Com todas as dúvidas com que nós vivemos, temos todos a consciência que é da inovação, que é da criatividade, que é da sociedade do conhecimento, que se vai fazer o nosso futuro, que esses são os atributos com que se fará a diferença para o futuro da sociedade que estamos a construir, e julgo que até será desses atributos que se fará, que poderemos almejar construir uma sociedade mais justa, mais equitativa. E, portanto, muito brevemente, aquilo que nós hoje nos propomos aqui fazer é uma reflexão um bocadinho sobre o papel das TIC no contexto global, no contexto europeu, e para isso nós temos connosco um protagonista de eleição, alguém que conhece muito bem o mundo das comunicações, alguém com mais de 30 anos de experiência no setor das TIC, com uma visão que é verdadeiramente europeia, que é verdadeiramente global, abrangente, e com quem julgo que teremos muito a aprender hoje à noite. O Verwaayen is the CEO of Alcatel-Lucent since 2008. He is the chairman of the board of climate change of the Confederation of the British Industry. He's a member of the board of the World Economic Forum. He was part of the BT Group. He was part of the board of the directors of BT Group. He was chief executive and chairman of the board operating committee. He played a central role in the separation of the group's wholesale and retail activities in the UK. In Lucent Technologies, he held various positions, having been vice president, chief operating officer, and vice president of the group. He was also part of KPN. He was president and managing director of the PTT Telecom subsidiary and at the ITT in Europe. He is an official of the Order of Orange Nassau. He is an honorary Knight of the British Empire, and he is a Chevalier de la Légion d'Honneur. He has, as you know, of Dutch nationality. He has a background in law a master's degree in law and international politics from the State University of Utrecht. And it's a pleasure to welcome you, Ben. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and let me start by apologizing for the fact that I have to address you in English. Although we live in a global world, and probably we better get used to it, that language will be a unifying force more than a dividing force. I thought that after a wonderful dinner, it's a little bit difficult to talk about other things than wonderful, very polite sentences, but on the other hand, that's very, very boring and probably also not very appropriate for an organization like yours. Because let me start by making two observations. The first observation is that I am impressed by the fact that the ICT industry in Portugal includes media. I think that's a logical step to take. It's a necessary step to take, but not many countries have done it. And the fact that you have done it, I commend you highly for that. I'm not sure that that has already translated totally in the membership, because if I look around, this looks to me still a very male-dominated group. So maybe the old boys network that was so used to be the ICT network is still alive and kicking here. I see that your table is an exception to the rule, but I have to say, ladies, you are in the minority here, and maybe to an extent that is, for the future, something that we need to reconsider, not just in Portugal, but overall. And talking about reconsider, I think we have a lot of things to reconsider. And what I would like to do is to make a few remarks that have to do with, first of all, the environment in which we operate, the economic environment in Europe, and the impact, the so what for the ICT industry, and second, making some maybe somewhat provocative observations, but you know now that I'm Dutch, so you may expect that. Not so much rounded stories, but more or less provocative ideas that may provoke one or two new steps. Because there's one thing for sure, our industry needs to change. It needs to change for many reasons, but the first reason is that our consumers, our customers, expect us to change. What they want from us is profoundly different than what they want from us 10 years ago. But let me first talk about the environment, the European environment, because you cannot open any discussion about anything in Europe, or it is about a crisis. And most people think that our crisis is a crisis about reducing government spend. That may be one of the parts in the solution, but our actual main issue is growth and competitiveness. Because perhaps for people in this audience, for most of you in this audience, the crisis is something you read about in the paper, and I'm now talking about age. But if you look to the next generation, the young generation, and you look to unemployment figures in your neighboring country, more than 50%, the cohesion of society as such is at stake. And in Europe, we had for a long time the idea that there was a kind of birthright on prosperity. If you were born in Europe, you may be better off than somebody else, but all of us would be okay, simply by the fact that we would be born in Europe. And I think that the first notion we need to have is that in a world that is developing so rapidly, the birthright on prosperity does not exist. It never existed, but certainly doesn't exist today. All of us, if you look around the world, will see that the development of other nations is not at the expense of us. Not at all. You could create a very good theory that says the development of other nations, like in India and in China and in Brazil and other places, is an expansion of our market opportunity. It's not their fault that we have a problem. It's our inability to cope with the speed of development elsewhere. So if you stand still and the rest is moving, it's very difficult to blame those who are moving for the fact that you're standing still. And that's the issue that we need to face. Because the value of what an economy brings is changing rapidly. Value is what brings prosperity, and prosperity what brings jobs, and jobs is, let's be honest, the only currency that really matters in a political environment. So what is that change that we see? Well, I'm blessed with 3 grandchildren. And this weekend I had my 8-year-old grandson from Amsterdam over in Paris, where he now live, and we spent a boys' weekend. So what the grandfather is doing, of course, you try to buy immediately the things that your grandson wants most. So I was ready to go to the toy shop when I asked him, what do you want? So I thought, Lego will have a great weekend. And what he said was, I want Minecraft. Minecraft is a game for 8-year-olds, and you buy points. You can earn points, but you can you expedite your capabilities by buying those points. And from all the things I offered him, all the physical stuff, he wanted a digital thing. It was not even a thing. He wanted a digital ownership. That's what he wanted. 8 years old. Value is changing in the economy. What we consider valuable is changing in the economy. In an analog, physical world, added value is something very difficult than in a digital reality world. And we're moving to the digital world. Our economies are moving to the digital world. Is that true? Well, our consumers do. But does the economy? Let's take closer to home in the ICT industry. Let's take mobility. Let's be honest, 5 years ago, if we as Europeans wanted to be proud of something, we could be proud of the showcase of the world of mobility. It was Europe. The networks were better, the services were better, the manufacturers were here, everything was cozy. It was a showcase. And if you would go west, you would go to the US, you came into the desert. You remember the time that you would leave a big city, we have no coverage, it was over. 5 years ago. If you look today, and you look where the developments are, it's almost reverse. Look to the players, look to the value. Maybe money doesn't talk always, but let's take Wall Street as a great indicator for the expectation of value. What is the most valuable company in the world nowadays? Apple. Apple is in the hand. The most valuable company. It is what you as a consumer have chosen to have as your preferred thing in your hand. What's the second most valuable company in the world? It's Google. And maybe the third is Facebook. It's in the cloud. Where is it coming from? West. Now is the interesting thing. If the indicator from the market is true, that the value is in the hand and in the cloud, amazingly, neither the hand nor the cloud can operate without something in between that we call the network. But the network companies are not so much in favor as the hand as the cloud. Actually, the network allows the hand and the cloud to be so popular. But for the consumer and the consumer contact, the wow effect is not in the network, it's in the hand and in the cloud. Not developed here, developed over there. If you want to develop applications, where is the application world coming from? Well, look to Asia. You may not be totally aware of it, but a lot of new application capabilities are developed on the other side, east, with a population size-wise and hungry-wise more competitive than ours. And here we have the creation of a capability that is like oil, an ingredient for other industry success. If you run an oil company, You need to know in real time what's going on in your fields, your networking, your drilling, and your capabilities. Actually, you run an operator. If you are today a fashion company and you want to be global, you need to reach out in social networks, because if you don't, your fashion doesn't make any sense anymore. Communications is no longer a separate industry. It's a horizontal. It's like oil. You know, in the old days, there were 2 flavors of oil. In a bottle and you could drink it, in a barrel and you could burn it. That was it. Today, oil is an ingredient in pharmaceuticals, in healthcare, in medicines, in a lot of other issues where it is an ingredient. And exactly the same thing is going to happen, and is happening as we speak, with our communications industry. So if that's such a vital industry, and you lose ground, you lose much more ground than just simply the ground that you have for the communications industry itself. And in the communications industry, we're struggling. We're struggling with 2 notions. The notion is basically best described, I think, as the contradiction that we all have in us. We all are consumers. And as a consumer, what do we want? We want the lowest possible price for the highest possible quality. That's what we want. That's this part of you. The other part of you, you're a citizen. And as a citizen, you turn around when you have 2 shopping bags full of that stuff that you just bought. You turn around to the government and say, protect me from that what I just did myself. Because as a citizen, you want protection, you want certainty. As a consumer, you want freedom and you want choice. And the same is happening in our industry. It is not easy to be a regulator, I admit it. But the regulation is built on the notion that consumers' interest is always the lowest price. And it is built on the notion of a consumer-dominated voice world. And in the voice world, you made an investment, you were absolutely predictable, and we introduced in this sector an all-you-can-eat package. And I'm guilty as charged. As an industry, we all participated in that. Because we had those wonderful algorithms that says if you eat 3 times a day at McDonald's, we can absolutely know how much money it will cost. But then the consumer turned around and said, I don't want McDonald's, I want the Ritz Hotel. I want 3-star Michelin quality. That's the equivalent from going from voice to video. And that's exactly what's happening. And we had it so wonderful organized. We had those very big screens, you know that? They were called a TV. So we had a big screen for the consumer, and we said to the consumer, there's a TV company, and there's a TV network, and there's a TV regulator, and there's a TV market. And then you had that mid-size screen, and we called it the PC. So we had a PC market, and a PC technology, and a PC supplier, and they had these small screens, mobile. And we called it the mobile market, with a mobile regulator, and a mobile network, and a mobile everything wonderful. Until the 14-year-old decided that they wanted whatever service they had on all 3 screens. They wanted it as they saw fit, at the moment, at the instant. So they didn't respect that wonderful carved-out 3-line difference industry that we had. But they simply have chosen, as the powerful consumer, the 14-year-old lady, the 14-year-old girl who said, I want my Facebook on whatever screen that I choose. I want my download from wherever I go. I want to communicate with everybody in a way and a method that I choose. And all of a sudden, the regulation didn't make any sense. The networks had to deal with a very different reality than they were built for. And the investor, who was looking at a short-term return, had to deal with long-term problems, and not just in the technology side of the house. If you are a media company, you have exactly the same behavior in front of you. And some of us still have the order of reality of 20 years ago in our head. And others of us dream about what will happen tomorrow when the chaos is even bigger, when you create your content yourself. One of the nicest things I've done in my career, I was the chairman of Endemol at the time that they created Big Brother. And I can tell you, as an old-fashioned guy, which I have to admit, I said, what's this for rubbish? It delivered them billions. So the nose for what is really going on is very difficult if your industry was too fit yourself. But there are a few things that I can tell you. As Europeans, starting on that level, we better take competitiveness and growth more serious than ever before, because we are standing still. And especially in the digital infrastructure, where we need to make sure that the promise that we had for 2020, remember, every European connected, at least for 30 MB to a network. Well, you guys in Portugal have done a great job. You're at 80%. The next one is around 30. There is no way, there is absolutely no way that today anybody can stand up and say we'll meet the 2020 target. It doesn't exist. I tried very hard last year for 6 months to get the industry around the table. And what? I have to say, together with René Obermann and Jean-Bernard Lévy from Vivendi, we were very successful for approximately 1 hour. We had everybody around the table, and everybody agreed going into the meeting that this is 11 principles that should bring us this investment criteria and this investment climate that's going to happen. But the meeting wasn't ended yet, of the old habit of shooting at each other started again, and it ended in tears. So we do not have a program that I'm convinced, no, let me say it stronger. We have no program that will deliver the 2020. We give it a shot in certain markets, and other markets are simply given up. 27 regulators and 1 super regulator is also very hard. I understand that. 128 operators in Europe, compared with maybe 10 in the whole of the US and 3 in China, it's a challenge. But it is a lousy excuse, because with 128 and our ability and our technology and our willpower, we should have been able to deliver, but we won't. So competitiveness will be an issue. A capability to create a market without the digital infrastructure, where the market is going digital, will be very difficult. A market where in the next generation will be disillusioned by the level of unemployment that we're going to give to them will contribute to that. And we, as an ICT growth industry, that's what we were. We need to rethink whether we still have that claim to fame of being a growth industry collectively. Do we have the capacity to innovate? Do we have the capacity to re-innovate ourselves? Are we willing to look in the mirror and say, we need to have a lot of different things on the table to continue to deliver that growth path? I think we need to, but it won't be easy. And the most difficult thing is not to talk about change, but to implement change, because it has to do with ourselves. So a grouping like this has 2 opportunities. You can bake in the glory of the industry that you have created, and everybody knows you have created something wonderful here. You have done a great job, and you can bake in that glory. Or you can look forward and saying, that's a plateau for which we can grow to the next stage. Are we contributing? And I think in Europe, that's a real debate we need to have. Because our industry has to look in the mirror and say, how are we going to create global growth, with Europe as a base? And that will be a challenge. The second thing that we have to do is look to our own value that we bring. Whether you're in the computer, in the software technology, whether you're in the telecommunication technology or the media, the value that you bring, the value that you were charging for in the past will not be the value that will create the future. You will get integration and separation of elements that are now seen as logical and defined. They will get illogical and undefined because of the changing environment in which you will operate. And third, and maybe most important, is do we have the energy to roll up our sleeves and to say, everything we had, that's great, but it is absolutely no guarantee to earn it. Because the world is becoming a more competitive place in all aspects, even for very successful people like you have today in this room. So what I wish you in Portugal are two things. First of all, I wish you the pride and the happiness of what you have done, because you have done in certain areas a fantastic job. But on the other hand, I wish you the realization that being in Portugal is no guarantee, is absolutely not a protection for what's happening in the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Vamos ter oportunidade para recolher 3, 4 perguntas e o Ben estará na disposição de responder. Eu peço-vos que, obviamente, as formulem em inglês. Vamos tentar recolhê-las todas de uma vez e ele responderá depois de seguida. Aceitam-se inscrições.
Ben, hi. Thank you very much for the very interesting challenges and issues which you raised. My name is Pedro Leitão. I work in a fixed telecom company as another person at this table. We have the same name. The question I would like to make is basically to test what your ideas would be if your next professional challenge would be to become a regulator of European telecom. I mean, you have a legal background, so that wouldn't be hard to imagine. And the key question I would like you to address is how you would balance your need to create the jobs, the political currency you talked about, with the need to satisfy the want of your grandson, your 8-year-old grandson, for better content, more easy to access equipment. Thank you.
I think the challenge for a regulator is not so much the intellectual challenge, it's the courage. Because I'm here in Lisbon, I go tomorrow, I go back to Paris. I have a lot of choice. I can go by foot, takes a little bit of time. I can go by train. I can go by car. I can go by plane. I can go first class. I can go second class. I can have choices. And it depends if I am at leisure because I'm on holiday or I am having some time on my hand. I may have a very different choice than if I'm pressed for time and I need to make a priority to getting there. That's choice. That's consumer choice. In the regulation in the telco world, the choice is made for you because you cannot choose quality of service. You can use quantity, but not quality. And we sell in the telecommunication world everything under the banner of quantity. Even quality we sell as quantity. And that's not to blame regulators, but it's the reality. We started by saying to population, if you have broadband, you get 20 MB. Nobody knows what an MB is, but 20 must be more than 19. So I want 20 rather than 19. Does anybody know here what an MB is, what it really means for you? No. So we say speed. Actually, we should have sold services. And for a movie, you have a different requirement than for simply looking to the weather. And if we would have been smarter in the past, we would have charged for email, which we didn't. You know, I come from the time that somebody came in my office when I was the boss of KPN and said, you know what, I have to build a billing system for data. That's ridiculous. Let's give it away for free because it's only a fraction of our traffic. 20 years later, it's 90% of what you do. So, we are not smart as an industry, but regulation around us doesn't stimulate to be smart. And I think that should be done. So my plea is, Give the power to the consumer. Let them choose. And of course, there are certain guarantees, like today's access to internet should be unbothered by whoever the supplier of the information is. But we have to go to a world that is in sync with the rest of the world, that gives choice to the consumer. Quality choice.
May I? Carlos Correia from APDC. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was brilliant. What I would like to have your comment, you mentioned the year of the world of 5 years ago, where mobile and in Europe was really leading mobile industry in the world. Nowadays things changed. I want to have your comments on how do you see LTE in this game? It will be an opportunity for Europe to recap. It's something that we lost already. What we have to do as an industry to really catch up in this area. Thank you very much.
So the question is, why are other regions investing more aggressively than Europe? That's the real question, because technology is global. You can buy from us and others on a global basis. There's no difference whether you go to China or to the US or to Europe. So it's not, and the knowledge base in Europe is, you know, if I can say something about operators, having been one myself, the knowledge base in Europe is second to none. So the people here, it's not a people issue. It's an investment incentive issue. And if you want to know why people are not investing, it is simply because they feel not stimulated to make those investments. If you want to solve it, you know where you have to look for the answer. Is it doable? I think it's absolutely doable. But if you are challenged that it's easier and better to milk the cow than to invest in the next generation, that's what companies will do. If you feel that you are not able to get the return on the risk investment that you take, then that's what you get. Now, is that popular to say? Absolutely not. It's politically totally incorrect what I'm saying here, but it's the truth. And I think it is time that we wake up to a reality. And the reality is that you could say, you know what, then you skip one generation. I've heard people say, you know, wait till 5G. Then you lost 4G, you know, the American lost the one and the others. It's not that it is bad for people to call their mom. They can still call their mom. So that's not a problem. It's a problem not for the telecom industry itself. It's a problem for all the other industries that make decisions where to locate. It's a problem for the companies, the mid-sized companies, the startup companies that want to compete with other companies around the world. Do you know where your competitor lives today? You don't. When I was young, I know where my competitors lived. They lived all in Holland. If I look to my grandchildren, do they know where their competitors are? Absolutely not. I am spoiled for choice if I have to hire 5 engineers at Alcatel-Lucent. I can hire them in China, I can hire them in Brazil, I can hire them wherever. Talent has no passport. Infrastructure does have a passport. Capabilities does have a passport. Industries do have a passport. So I think the answer is very simple. We need to get the incentive for investment and risk-taking up in this industry.
Ben Paul Simões from APDC. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Now, just before dinner, the two of us were talking about whether our generation was going to give to our children a better world. And you asked me, and rightly so, what does a better world mean? So I remember that in the American Declaration of Independence, it says in the first paragraph that it's the right to be in pursuit of happiness. So, and that right to be in pursuit of happiness does not exist in any constitution in Europe. So I'm going to ask you whether you think that this right to be in pursuit of happiness is really important in what we are going to give to our next generation, and you think that this is something that we as an industry can help in achieving as well?
Wow, that's, I'm a business guy, I'm not a philosopher, but You should ask my daughter. Anyway, so let me try to answer that a little bit different. Why is it that certain things happen in certain parts of the world and not in other parts of the world? I think it is undeniable true that the next generation will have a tougher challenge to keep prosperity, to keep opportunity, to keep the level of self-development at the level that we have experienced in the last 2 or 3 generations. It will be tougher because there are other people who also can compete, and unless that we understand that that is bigger opportunity for us, and we keep reacting defensively as we do now in Europe, very defensively, curtains, close the door, curtains. I mean, there's a whole political movement now in Europe that basically says, you know, the solution is very simple. Close the door, close the curtains, send the foreigners away and everything will be great. I mean, that's a typical restoration thought that history has told you many, many times that came back into Europe. It's coming back today, unfortunately. So in that environment, it is hard to be an entrepreneur. And what we need more than anything else is not big corporations understanding the call for change. That's also important. But more important than that is the entrepreneurial spirit that people say, I can do things. I can make it better for myself. I can develop a next generation. I can do things that my parents couldn't. And for whatever reason, in the US, that's a natural thing. And there is an ecosystem there that is inspiring. There is a venture capital system that gives readily available money, and if you fall flat on your face, they come with the next generation of money if you have a better idea. We don't have that in Europe. There's an encouragement to take risk. We don't have that here. So we have a number of issues that we need to overcome, and they are well known. I mean, we have written what we called the Lisbon Agreement. You remember that? Lisbon Agreement, the promise, the most competitive continent in the world. Nobody's talking about it anymore because we all know that, you know, it was a wonderful piece of paper. But we have to take certain decisions, in what we do with our lives. And I think that this industry is in a strange situation. We provide so much more opportunity for so many more people than we ever did before, that I think this is an opportunity that is a business opportunity, an entrepreneurial opportunity, but also a contribution to society. And, you know, if you listen to what people in public functions do, and my colleague here told me the story about what he is doing in Porto. If you understand what they do, that will give an impulse to a large group of people. I think as a grouping, you have a capacity and a capability to have the same impact in giving a new impulse. And the issue is not whether we are living here, it is much more whether we are living here with the desire to go and do it. In the East, it's very simple. It is the first time opportunity they ever had in their life. In the US, it's the spirit and the money that's available. In Europe, we need to find our own recipe for that.
Well, good evening. In a certain way, I should say that I'm the media man around here, as I am the chairman of the Portuguese Confederation for the Media, that special thing that you said that we have achieved in Portugal. Well, last year, when you addressed after the meeting that you have referred of the European CEOs of all the telecoms, you addressed a letter to Barroso and Cruz about what you could do about the contents on the 2020 digital environment. And after that, you remember your countrymate Cruz has nominated another countryman of you, Christian Fantillo, as the chairman of the European Industry Stakeholders Group of Studies. And Christian Fantillo, which is the chairman of the Pearson Group, has elected intellectual property rights as being the main concern of the media industry on what concerns the matching with the industry that you represent. So my question is, how do you see and after the letter that you wrote to Barroso and Cruz last year, the role of intellectual property rights in the development in this industry, where your grandson, like my grandsons, are always asking me if they can take it everything from the net, because they think that everything is for free. And you are in a country where creativity has been for centuries the way that our culture is still alive.
So this is a very important subject, because you're right. If you want to create a competitive model, a financial viable model, you will need to have not just physical but also intellectual protection for creativity and for ownership. You know, in Europe we have done 40 years to quarrel about patents. And the reason why we don't have a European patent is that we can't agree about language, which language we would use. Everybody uses English, but then somebody thinks that he or she cannot come home as a minister to just agree that let's have one language, and it happens to be English. That's the language of business around the world. That is politically incorrect, and therefore we have no patent. And even after everybody has made the agreement that cost us an enormous amount of business, pride is more important than anything. And here's the second subject. It's a no-brainer, your point on intellectual property. Combine that with the freedom that you want for the consumer, and you can make a very, and I mean many proposals, a very digestible and acceptable model. The problem is you'll have to make a priority call. You have to make a decision. And it's with many things in life, making a decision is probably not the natural thing what we do in Europe. So we are very proud in the financial crisis that we muddle on. We're muddling on. That's our explanation to the rest of the world. I'm afraid on your subject, we're muddling on.
Eu vou pedir, não vamos querer abusar do tempo do Ben, que se levantou hoje muito cedo, chegou a Lisboa hoje de manhã. Pedia uma grande salva de palmas. Ben, thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure.